out at Dad for forgetting the size of the bolt he'd screwed in and out thousands of times. Perhaps to make the process go faster, Mike climbed Dad's ladder and began loosening the bolts himself. He made maybe 2 turns on the second bolt when it unexpectedly popped out, causing the other bolt to pop out from its socket. Once this happened, nothing was left to hold the unit, and it dropped, swinging in Mike's face. The weight of the unit combined with the force in which it struck him caused him to fly backwards uncontrollably onto the floor. This all happened in a matter of about a second. Dad said he felt helpless as he watched it occur. I believe even all these years later, he's still been unable to forgive himself. I probably don't have to tell you that Mike didn't survive. Regardless of the quick response by the EMS, he was most likely gone before he arrived at the hospital. Dad returned to the scene soon after to see if he could discover the reason for the accident. It appeared whoever installed that opener had used very short bolts. When Mike began to loosen them, expecting there would be plenty of threads to hold the unit, his fate was sealed. Dad thought about tracking down the installer, but realized it wouldn't bring Mike back. He did, however, return to every one of their rental properties and check the bolts. Fortunately, none of the others had short bolts, and Dad could truly move on and begin to mourn his lost friend. As I sat and listened to him describe the accident, something struck me as strange about it. To me, it appeared as if Dad was the intended target, but Mike walked into it by mistake. When I say target, I don't mean someone conspired to harm him. I mean rather that fate had chosen Dad to die that day instead, but Mike foiled its plans. After he completed the story, I mentioned this to him. He attempted to blow it off as he had when I mentioned my concerns in the past. But this time, something deep inside was stirred up, and he told me the tale of the palm reader. When he was done telling it, he promised me from that day on that he'd never go back out on a job, no matter the customer. He also promised to take my mom's and my concerns more seriously now. I could sense that there were some incidents in his past that helped strengthen his resolve to do this, but he kept those to himself, and I didn't pry. I was just happy to know he was going to be more mindful of his fears and feelings, that I wasn't crazy thinking I had some form of ESP or whatever you choose to call it. The weird looks Mom used to get on her face sometimes right before something bad would happen made much more sense now. It also explains why Dad always said, I take after Mom. Not soon after, maybe 5 years later, Dad sold the business to Mike's son and retired. He and Mom bought one of those massive RVs and have toured America for the last 12 years or so. Once or twice a month, we talked with one another over the phone, and my mom admitted to me during one of those discussions that she hadn't had a single bad feeling about Dad in the 16 years since the accident. I didn't have to tell her it was the same for me, as she already knew. It's just another aspect of the connection the three of us have shared all these years. When I was still young, maybe 6 or 7, my folks got the great idea of converting our garage into a family game room. This was in the 80s. The idea of the family game room was really becoming popular, mostly because of the rise of arcades and the availability of arcade games and consoles like the Atari 2600 to the consumer market. It was truly an amazing time to be a kid. Although my parents often used the garage to store things, my dad grew tired of being unable to watch TV because my brother and I were always using it to play games. He had seen a conversion a neighbor had done and decided this would be the best way to get his television back. First, he traveled to the local hardware store and purchased a steel shed to make up for the storage space he'd been losing. Along with a 6-pack of Miller High Life, he spent a few days putting it up in our backyard. He seemed pleased with his work, despite it falling in on itself within a year. His next steps was to find a company able to do the conversion for a fair price. He called every company in the phone book, but they wanted more than he wanted to pay. After asking around, a friend of his recommended a group of guys who had remodeled his kitchen for dirt cheap. Since my dad was a first-class cheapskate, these were the guys for him. They were contacted, and after a lot of haggling, Dad hired them for the job. Dad was in such a hurry to regain control of the TV that He couldn't wait until the spring to start the renovation. As a result, the guys had to use space heaters in order to be comfortable working in the Kansas winter. For the start, these guys were nothing but trouble. When they did show up to the house, they did very little, and often called it a day by 3 p.m. My dad had complained several times. Once or twice, he even had to make them redo some piece of shop work. If I remember right, my mother tried to get them to fire the guys and hire a new company, but regardless of all the headaches, Dad was a miser to the bone. Eventually, he would be forced to get a new set of contractors. However, this was only because a near-deadly disaster was forcing him to. One day, Billy, my little brother, and I would be put to bed just like any other evening. At some point in the middle of the night, my mother would shake me awake. She was yelling and had a very panicked look on her face. I slowly started to rise when I began to smell smoke. Mother was next door yelling at my brother. It wasn't long before the smoke caused me to start choking and coughing. I remember I was putting on my robe when my mother came running back into my room, carrying Billy on her shoulder. I don't think he was even awake yet. She pushed me out of my room and ran down the hall towards the front door. My dad was standing in the foyer. He must have been waiting for us. The house had filled with a thick black smoke by then, but I couldn't see any fire. This changed once we all made it out to the front lawn. I stood with the rest of them watching the flames engulfing the house and illuminating the neighborhood. Fire trucks arrived a minute later, and we all got checked out by the paramedics. They fought the fire for over an hour, but the house was already done for. We will be living in a motel for the next 6 months or more. After a week after the fire, Dad got a report that stated it had been started by a faulty space heater in the garage. I can only imagine how furious he was to read this. This still didn't stop him from wanting to hire the Yahoos back to rebuild the whole house. My mother put her foot down at this point, though. When she threatened to take Billy and I and move in with her parents, Dad folded and hired a very reputable company to do the job. I'm suspicious he only chose them because he wasn't paying for it. The check from the insurance company did. He probably would have found another group of cowboy builders to do the job and kept the extra money, but I don't think he thought of that. I love the money, but Jesus. The work was completed rather quickly. My parents chose to have the new house rebuilt in almost the exact same design as the original. The one major difference was the construction of a large game room at the back. The family would spend the majority of our next 10 years in there, even Dad. The garage was put back to work storing things, and the shed left to collapse. It's still there, a big pile of rusty steel, all these years later.